Welcome back. Man, we had a great couple days. Well, Matt, I think he's just wandering the countryside. Some kind of holiday thing, I've been told. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show. And I'm excited that y'all are here. I've appreciated over the last several days your feedback. I've some interesting stories today. First of all, we're going to go through the update of my family Christmas pictures over at Harlansdale Farm in Franklin. I want to apologize. My wife told me that I had to change quickly, so changing in the parking lot, I may have scarred some individuals. I apologize deeply for that. We'll talk about, we want to get some holiday in here. I've been told that I can be a little grinchy. I'm a policy nerd and a wonk, and I want to talk about what's going on in current events and, you know, what the right policies are and not what is your favorite Christmas cookie. Well, we should talk about some of that stuff today, fill in some of that because it does matter. We do need to engage one another, and those traditions are quite relevant and wonderful. Again, before I start any show, I want to be transparent about what I do and where I'm coming from so you guys understand, and it's fair to you that you don't have any weird influences or anything. I'm over at the Tennessean as a columnist. I'm on the editorial board. Love it over there. Those folks treat me wonderfully. I write for AL.com, and I spend a lot of time at Thanks in Franklin, where we work on small gestures of gratitude that help you build your business. Love the team there. Absolutely wonderful. If you've ever been to the Franklin Square and you wonder, okay, what's on the second floor of some of these buildings? Well, I can tell you unequivocally, right above Ruby Sunshine is Thanks. So come by and say hey. Wonderful, wonderful team there. I also, in terms of the writing and stuff like that, I'd urge you to go check it out online, at D. Cameron Smith on Twitter. And I really value the conversation. I learn from you. I learn from the feedback. I learn from when you're like, hey, that was really good. And also, oh, man, that was awful. We all do better with that. And I think it makes us more resilient, and particularly in a context where there's a whole heck of a lot of stuff going on right now, and it's kind of chaotic. We need to be resilient. We need to be able to engage and push back on stuff that's garbage and lift up what's righteous. And so I encourage all of y'all to be those kind of people. And to that end, before I came on air, again, Dan Mandis is somebody that I listen to. For beard tips, I go to Matt Murphy. He's got a nice fanged beard, some good white fang beard going on.
I think you're doing that backwards.
I should go to Dan Mandis for beard counsel?
No, Matt should be going to you for beard counsel.
Well, Dan was giving me some good feedback, and one of the things that everybody you hear on the air at Super Talk 99.7, everybody wants to get better. Everybody wants to learn from the audience, learn from how to engage, and one of the things that Dan said is so critical to all of us on air is establishing that common ground. That, hey, we may disagree on the nuances of different policies and things like that, but we do want to push back and fight against the folks who say, you know what? Morality is relative. Find your truth. Yeah, I want to push back on that. I think we need to specify what we mean by woke culture, but this idea that up is down and left is right and good is evil and evil is good, yeah, we've got some common ground there. We need to push back on that. We can't say everything is fine, let's keep on rocking and rolling, when folks are trying to erode the very sort of fiber of existence in the sense of right and wrong. I think that is one of the things that my kids and I talk about all the time. I've got 4 boys in my house, and I asked them the other day, I said, what was it that the devil did in the Garden of Eden during the fall? What was the question that he asked folks? Some of you know the answer to this. My boys do. It wasn't do bad stuff. It wasn't, hey, you should really go and find your truth and all of this stuff. What the devil said is he asked one real simple question. Did God really say that? Did he really say that? And I think that's regardless of what your belief system is, the question's the same: is truth really true? Is right really right and wrong really wrong? Do you really? And it gives you that wiggle room to say, well, maybe, how people feel is more important than what's right and what's wrong and what's true and what's not. And I'm not arguing that we should treat people poorly because they have a benighted view of reality, because they lift up what is untrue. We should feel sorry for them. But I think that's where our culture is sort of bought into this notion that everything's fine. There's no source of truth. Nothing is objectively right and wrong. So kind of do what you feel. And I think that's a source of common ground. The notion that, even simple things like, should we have secure borders and an orderly system of immigration? Many of you and I have that common ground because that's an easy question. Yeah, of course we should. Some other folks say, well, actually, if, 2.5 million folks flood across the border, well, we're just being really mean if we tell them, no, that you can't do it that way. We're being mean if we say, you can't just release people into the interior and say, hey, come on back when you want to, be deported. That's not a thing. And so those baselines are really important. I believe, I understand that we have different perspectives, even within the Republican Party, on, Department of Defense and the military, and whether the military should be strong or not. I do have my misgivings about the military-industrial complex, but I think that America's military strength is relevant to its ability to push for liberty, not just at home, but around the world. And no, I am not a fan of constant wars, and I don't think that that's something that we should wish on anybody. But I absolutely want to be able to finish a fight. And I have real questions about our capacity to do that, and whether that's the objective of our military or whether it's more social programming. I certainly hope it's not the latter. But again, I think many of you and I have that common ground. And so it's something, I was a kid. The first administration of my life was Ronald Reagan's administration. And I don't remember it directly, but I've looked back at it. I've studied it as a student of history. And the idea of a big tent Republican Party, of let's find our common ground, let's figure out how we can urge the nation and the world towards freedom, is something that I think you and I have to find a way to do. And in fact, let me get edgy here. I think we have to look for common ground with folks outside the Republican Party, with outside conservative circles. And it is so weird for me to say some of these things about John Fetterman, the hoodie. But to see him on Israel say, no, we should call for Hamas to surrender and lay down their arms. That's what we need to be calling for. We don't need to be calling for different ceasefires and things like that. We need to be calling for Hamas to surrender. Wow, man. I think I can find common ground there. When he's saying, yeah, actually having a system of immigration that makes sense and securing our borders, that's not crazy talk. Yeah, okay. Let's find that common ground. And so that's one of the things that I'd urge you guys too. It's not just us finding common ground, on this show, but finding common ground in real life with other people and saying, okay, what is it we want? What is it we care about? What is it we value? And how are we going to advance the ball? That's something that I have a maniacal focus on. I feel so strongly that we must be able to have strong communities, strong churches, strong families, and then say, okay, now what do we want to do? And do that thing. Because you guys know that things are not going well. We all know that we have these clear problems. We have an abject failure of leadership. We talked about that yesterday. And I heard you. And it was almost, there was a sense of sadness. Like, well, yeah, we all know this. Well, now what? We know this. Well, and some of you guys pointed out that this is the reason that you support Trump. You actually called Trump your monkey wrench. Was like, I don't like how the way it's going. This is the guy to highlight that it's really crazy and awful and terrible and blow it up. actually will concede that point. I think he has done that and done that quite well. And then my follow-on is still the same. Now what? And I think we got to figure some of those things out. And so we'll talk about that today. We're actually going to talk about Hamas. We'll get into some of the immigration stuff. I want your opinions as far as the now what. Like, what does it look like? We talk about securing the border. Some of it's physical border wall. I get that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Some areas, as somebody who's worked on the Senate Judiciary on the immigration subcommittee and looked at it, there's some areas where the wall is just deeply impractical. Okay, what do we do there? Okay, what does the system look like? Who's coming in? What should we do about it? Who wants to come in? What should we do about it? That's something we need to talk about. When I mentioned the situation in Israel, first, I want to be real clear. I'm not going to let this go, and you shouldn't either. The idea that a lot of the mainstream media has just said, well, actually, Israel's doing their thing. We don't really want to talk about it anymore. We're moving on to other topics. We shouldn't. We should talk about this because it doesn't have implications for just Israel. It has implications for the West, for folks who are Christians, Jews. We can go down the list. We need to start listening to Hamas and taking them at their word about what they want. That's a big deal. One of the story I'm going to lead, actually, we're going to get to all that, but I'm going to lead with a story that actually happened to me and my family. This is going to shock you guys, and I think it's something that we need to pay attention to because it involves juvenile justice. It involves my family's experience with it in Williamson County, and some of the things that are just assumptions that parents think about how those systems work, they're not true. And you may find yourself in a situation where your kid gets picked up and you don't have any access. We should talk about that. I want you to know because I want to bring these things to your attention so that you're not left sitting there holding the bag. You're not left sitting there wondering about what's happening while your kid is in a juvenile justice facility. It's hard talk, but it's important talk, and it's what we're going to do here on Super Talk 99.7. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy. We got to take a break, but when we come back, you know what we're talking about.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. When we get to retirement, what do we want to do? We want to go and kick back, right? But we also want to take an income from our investment portfolios. And there are a lot of common myths that I hear about how do you take an income from an investment portfolio. One is that people will get into, this was really big a few years ago, really big, real estate investment trust. Now, real estate gets rented and it kicks off an income, and then you have some kind of dividend that's paid, and because the REIT has to pay out most of the dividend, it's a great way to take income in retirement. But what happens, like what happened recently, when all of a sudden the properties go unrented? What happens to your income? Bye-bye, it's gone. Another thing that I see is this: people buy stocks or stock mutual funds that are dividend paying, and what we'll do is we'll live off the dividends. Well, what is the dividend? It's part of the earnings of the company. So you got the earnings of the company, right? And then what happens is the company may pay out some of the dividend, and they call that a dividend when they pay it out, or they may retain some of it, and it's called retained earnings. Well, the problem is this: what if the company's earnings go down, just like the real estate investment trust up here? What if the earnings go down? What happens to your dividend? it goes away. All of a sudden, it's bye-bye to your retirement income. So what do we want to do? We want to diversify way better. If you look at the academic research on investing and how to take income from a portfolio, quite often what it is saying, okay, I'm going to have some money in various asset classes. Large companies, small companies, value companies, growth companies, international companies, short-term bonds and intermediate bonds and so on and so forth. And what I do is I look at these different areas of the market and they have a historic return. And what happens if the portfolio does this area of the market does better than this one? Well, in that particular year, I'm going to take income from this part of the portfolio. Then the next year, maybe this area does better than everything else. I'll take income from there. So what I'm doing is diversifying, which is an age-old concept. I mean, good grief, Nobel Prize winning concept of investing. And I actually apply it to taking income from a portfolio. So why is it that we often see this kind of stuff? It's because of the fees and the commissions and all of the incentives to sell you things that maybe aren't in your best interest. And a lot of advisors, you look at it, they aren't held to a fiduciary standard. In other words, they don't have to keep your best interest first. Paul Winkler, Inc., we hold ourselves voluntarily to that standard, and we actually disclose it in our disclosure brochures. So if you want to know more about what we do and learn more and educate along the way, go to paulwinkler.com. Set up a free 15-minute phone.
Welcome back. Cameron Smith filling in for Matt Murphy. Appreciate you guys listening. Chime in on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. That's 615-737-9986. You can call in or you can text in. Text has become the communication method of the day. And so I can see the text line and I'll try to respond to you guys and engage you during the breaks. It's actually a lot of fun. So, I want to get, before I get into the juvenile justice stuff, and man, it's going to shock you guys. I wanted to give a shout out to both the Dr. Patel at Nolensville Family Dentistry and Dr. McLaren at McLaren Orthodontics in Nolensville. I'm very happy to live in a community where my son can go to a family event, get his tooth shattered by a flying comb, and the next day be able to get it all squared away. That is absolutely amazing. It's one of the great things I love about living in Nolensville is it is a community place where people treat you well. Both Dr. McLaren and Dr. Patel were on the spot. My oldest son, last night, we had a family gathering to decorate my mom and dad's absolutely excessively large Christmas tree. This is something that we do every year. We did it after family pictures. Oh, the trauma. We were doing this, and then we're getting ready to leave, and my 14-year-old son, who I refer to as the Beast, was messing with one of his cousins. And he was like messing with her hair or something like that. She takes and it wasn't a comb, it was a brush, and launches it at him right when he turns around, and the edge of the brush, and he has braces, catches his face, shatters his tooth, one of his canine teeth, and breaks the bracket. So he's spitting out blood and pieces of tooth and all kinds of, this is what happens to my family, and mostly to my oldest son. And that's what he was dealing with. We put some, like, the numbing gel on it overnight, and then we went to the orthodontist, to Dr. McLaren, to take off his braces so he could go to Dr. Patel to fix the tooth and try to put it back together, to go back to Dr. McLaren to put the braces back together.
Did she get a talking to?
Oh, she did. But, she's I think she's actually a little bit older than the Beast. And so it wasn't a little cousin, and she got some momentum behind that brush. But I think it was one of those things where it wasn't malicious, but it surprised her a lot, and it certainly surprised Cam. And his head is the most valuable head I've ever seen. I have spent literally, no joke, tens of thousands of dollars on. He's had his nose rebuilt because his little brother literally knocked his nose sideways with an elbow.
Poor kid.
Yeah, like so he's already had the nose rebuilt. He's had a really bad concussion in football. He's had his eyebrow split open. He was the first person at the Vestavia Hills Library in Alabama to spill blood there because it's a library. But he tripped, and that the library carpet that's like real dense just hit the edge of his eyebrow just right, popped it open. He was running I guess he was like 4 or 5. Like, this is the same kid I'm talking about. He's only 14 years old, and this has all happened to him. He got real excited when he was little, and he was coming to see me because I came home from work, and he was in socks, and the floor was like a hardwood floor, and he slipped and caught his other eyebrow on a screw coming out of the back of his high chair, and we had to get that stitched up. Now this isn't his head, but we were hiking along the Duck River and going for a swim. He slipped, had to get 13 stitches in his shin. His nickname is now Crash. Like, if it's gonna
Maybe
happen,
it ought to be bubble wrap.
Yeah. I mean, we laugh about it now, but like, if it can impact somebody, it's going to impact him. And again, just the value of the various surgeries and procedures on his head alone is shocking and significant. But Dr. Patel, Dr. McLaren took care of us this morning, and to live in a place where not only do you know those people, but they can work you in and help you out, and not because you're awesome, but because that's what they do and they're awesome, that really matters. And so, to all you folks out there who are service providers who help families like mine, thank you. It really matters to have folks that will work you in when things are going really, really poorly. And last night and today, that was one of those things. Thankfully, that happened after family pictures. So, we don't have like a snaggletooth with jagged edges hanging out there. So that was positive. A lot of good things happening there, Belle. But I definitely wanted to say that because that matters so much. And some of you have made a point on the Super Talk text line that caretakers, people who are helping out, this is a great time of year to go to them and say thank you. Show your appreciation. Let people know that they matter, because there are a lot of people that help out my family year round. Coaches, teachers, caretakers, the mail guy, the trash guys. Like, try to know everybody. Engage them. My wife loves to make these candy pecans, and then she, gives them out to everybody as just a little thank you. In my family, we call those happies. Like, that's the thing. We give happies to people because it makes them happy. It's a really good idea. I would just encourage you guys to do this. So let me tell you, and I'll kind of set things up. We have to take a break in a couple minutes, but let me set up this story, okay? As you guys know, and I've mentioned on the air the last couple of days, and generally I try to make sure that people understand that, one, we support fostering the Smith family, and it's something that we want other people to consider too. Also, there are a lot of challenges with that, right? It's not super easy, but it's noble and it's important. So we had a new son come into our house, and literally a week after that, there was an incident where, because there's a legal proceeding, I don't want to get too far into the details, but the bottom line is there was something that happened that required engagement by law enforcement. And I in no way blame law enforcement with other foster kids. We've gotten to know law enforcement in Nolensville really well, and they are fantastic and wonderful. And we have to keep people safe, and we have legal processes so that we can do that effectively. And that includes sometimes, young teens and other folks that run afoul of the juvenile justice system. That is a reality. And my family found ourselves in that situation. And so I get a call saying, well, your son has been picked up for the thing. And I said, okay, well, can we come and see him? And they said, no. I said, excuse me? No, you may not come and see him. He can speak to his attorney, which if any of y'all have ever hired an attorney, I am an attorney. So if any of y'all have tried to procure an attorney on short notice, unless you have one on retainer and it's easy, it's not super easy to do. And it certainly takes time, particularly if things happen later in the day, that sort of thing. So no, you can't talk to him for 24 hours. And then there'll be a hearing and you can talk to him then. And I said, okay. So y'all are just going to hold him overnight at the juvenile justice facility. And neither my wife nor I can speak to him or have any contact. Correct. That got me a little teed off, but I said, okay, well, tell me about this policy. Where is this policy? Is this a law? What's going on? And they said, well, we'll talk about it. You can ask about it when you come to the hearing. So the next day I go to the hearing. I see my son for the first time in 24 hours. And I said, okay, these hearings are kind of boring, but you kind of go through the system. They set a trial date, that kind of thing. And that's what you do, right? That's part of the legal process. Totally fine with that. The judge, the folks were great. No problem there. But then I asked the head of the facility and said, tell me where the policy is and let me see it. And she explained to me that I was upset. You bet I was upset. We got to take a break. We'll finish this and get the details here and what the issue is on the other side. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back to all you wonderful listeners, the haters and losers too, to the online people creepily looking at me from the eye in the sky up there. Hello. Sometimes I forget that. I try not to pick my nose that often or do weird things, but sometimes, you need a good scratch here and there, and I apologize in advance. We're talking about, when I started last segment, I was talking about the process with juvenile justice in Williamson County, what I'm familiar with, and, my son's engagement with that system. And the big thing that I'm focused on that was truly shocking to me was the ability of the system and sort of the state writ large to cut off parental access to a child who gets arrested. That to me is just insane. As a lawyer who understands the Constitution, who understands due process, the idea that at any point in a legal proceeding, a minor could be cut off from a parent, and the parent is supposed to just say, well, hey, I trust you. And I want to be real clear. The folks at the Williamson County Juvenile Justice Center are fantastic. They're wonderful. Most of them. The idea that a parent should have to just trust them and take their word for it, it doesn't matter how great of people they are or how wonderful law enforcement is. We should always be able to have access to our kids for a couple reasons. One, specifically, kids can waive their rights. And so in an adversarial legal proceeding, you need to basically get to them and say, hey, shut your mouth, only speak to your legal representative. Even if you don't calm them down or try to say, hey, you're not trapped, And when I ask about the policy that it leads to this, I was told, we'll talk about that later. Well, that's actually not what Tennessee law says. When a resident of the state of Tennessee asks to produce an official document to the caretaker of those documents, in this case, the juvenile justice courts, they have to produce them as a matter of law. And the idea that I could ask for that and be told sort of no was a little bit of a problem for me. And as you guys can gather from my general demeanor, I don't give up easily or just take no for an answer. So I filed an open records request to send them a letter, and they, at that point, realized it was serious and complied. And they sent me the policy, and I've pulled it up in front of me. And it's part of the Williamson County juvenile detention rules. And what it says is, and this is the one that's kind of weird. Generally, this is Rule 10, generally each detainee, first of all, it says generally. That's one of my favorite words as a matter of law. So as a basic practice, each detainee, after being detained for 24 hours, it says after being detained for 24 hours, will be allowed one phone call per day at a minimum. Detainees will be afforded at least one personal call per week. And they'll made between these hours and be made only to parents, guardians, clergy, counselors, and attorneys. And it, to me, is, okay, this seems a little bit weird. If this is what we're going with, that after 24 hours, you get to just cut the kids off. Sorry, you don't have the ability to communicate with your parents. Rule 11, visitation will be allowed after a juvenile has been detained for 24 hours. Visitation hours are what they are for parents and legal guardians only. 1 30-minute visit per day. The problem with the Williamson County rules is that the Tennessee rules say that a detained child has the right to communicate with the child's attorney and parent, guardian, or other custodian, and that provision will be made by the detention facility to allow for such private communication. It doesn't talk about, it says they have a right. It doesn't say that they have a right that attaches after 24 hours. It doesn't say that it's down the road. What I'm getting at here, folks, I hope that none of you ever have to encounter law enforcement in a negative light, in an adversarial way where you're getting arrested. I hope that you don't end up running afoul of the juvenile justice system. But this is how These are the kind of things, these are the details that really matter. And I can't speak to what the policies are in Rutherford County or other juvenile justice systems. But when I ask about these policies, even when they wouldn't show me the policy, they said, well, it's public safety. Okay, well, that sounds really good, but the idea that you're talking to someone in a lockup, they can't leave by definition. Come on. Like, what's the risk? I'll tell you what the risk is. The risk is that you can have your kids say something to law enforcement that prejudices their rights at trial. I mean, that's a big deal. And again, I hope that you don't find yourself in that situation. But the moment that you get a phone call that says, hey, we've picked up your child, you should be able to say, cool, thanks. Let me speak to them. And so I think that's something that, I just want people to be aware of this. You don't have to agree with me, and you may think it's totally cool that if your kid gets picked up, you don't have the ability to talk to them for 24 hours. I don't. I think that's insane. So, I mean, I want to understand, and we need to have the discussion, but the fact that here's what happens. Kid gets picked up by the police, gets taken to, essentially gets locked up. How many families want to talk about that? How many families want to sort of raise their hand and say, hey, we've had that encounter? None of them. Nobody wants to talk about it. So this kind of stuff happens. And then people are like, well, that sounds bad, but I don't want to say anything. Well, I'm saying something because I think it's wrong. Cut has a question on this, so we'll go there. Cut, what do you got?
Cameron, this is what I'm going to tell you. Okay, first off, I might have been, quote unquote, Van Gogh listening. I didn't hear why he got picked up, but my first question would be, why did he get picked up? And my second point would be, well, my first point would be, dude, nowadays they can go get their penises cut off and you can't do nothing about it. Okay, what do you expect?
Yeah,
I mean,
that sounds
it's
bad
just that
too.
plain, just that simple.
Yeah,
it's
and
just that plain, just that simple.
You're making my point, and I appreciate the call. I really do. So one of the reasons that I didn't, just so you know, go into the specific details is because this is a pending case. So I'm not going to go, into those details because there's ongoing litigation. I don't want to deal with that in terms of prejudicing that one way or another. What I'm specifically talking about is a process issue here of any kid that gets picked up for anything, and I mean anything. You cannot, in fact, if you can hear the sound of my voice and you can articulate something that would be so unsafe that a child could get picked up for while they're in custody, while they are locked up, that would be a matter of public safety for them to talk to their parents. That doesn't make any sense because if you're telling me literally what I was told is, well, they can talk to an attorney or a member of the clergy. Wait a minute. Whoa. You're telling me that they can talk to the pastor that they are not that close with. They can't talk to their parents because public safety? That sounds not great. That sounds like a huge problem. And that's what I'm going after here, is I'm not asking for law enforcement not to do their job. I'm not asking for, some kids find themselves in those situations. So be it. I support law enforcement. What I'm saying is if you don't have a good reason that you can articulate as to why you need to separate a child from communication with their parents at a point of significant legal jeopardy, then we shouldn't have that policy. Period. The legislature, Jack Johnson, he's my state senator. I expect you to do something about this kind of stuff. Because I understand that the legal process must continue, but the critical part of that is making sure that folks accused of crimes at any stage in that process have the ability to not compromise their representation and not be, particularly if they're minors, cut off from the folks that are charged with protecting them. And so I get it. I can't just go to a juvenile justice facility and wave my hands and say, give me my kid. That's not how that works. But you can't tell me I can't talk to them to figure out what we need to do as far as next steps. And when it comes to kids, they're terrified. They're terrified. And frankly, they should be. Like, this is serious stuff, and it should be taken seriously. But the ability to go in, calm them down, and say, hey, here's what's next. We have not abandoned you. Especially to a traumatized kid who's been abandoned before. I mean, are you kidding me? And that's where we are, and that's what we're talking about. I've got Teresa and Lafayette. What do you got, Teresa?
Okay, first of all, let me just say this. My son is now 39 years old.
Okay.
When he was 17, there were issues. Got no lot to tell. But I was a school teacher, and I was trying to get the help that he needed during the time. On a Saturday morning, I'm going to say 2 o'clock in the morning, well, Sunday, 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call that he's been picked up.
Sure.
Okay, so from that standpoint, of course, I head on to the jail because they would not let me talk to him. So I head to the jail to see what's going on. Anyway, at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, you have the juvenile judge, whatever, that comes through the door, points his finger in my face and said, he's gone this time. And I said, I just backed up and I said, that's fine. So he walks in there and he walks back out and he says, I apologize. He said there was another kid there that had been in trouble several times before. My child had never been in any, well, he had been, but not with the legal people or whatever. And he apologizes. I'm pregnant at the time, but I looked at him and I started crying and I said, I understand that this is serious. I said, but give me time to get some help for my child. We were already in the process. And I begged and I pleaded and I pleaded and I begged. So he went back in, talked to my 17-year-old son, came back out, said to me, we set the court date, but this is what's going to happen. I think I had 2 weeks to get something in place. But during that time period, he was sent to Shelbyville, Tennessee. I could not visit my child until I could go down there. I could watch him through a glass window. I could not talk to him, period, end of discussion. We get to court, and when we got to court, guess what they did? He was under the influence the night they took him in. He got to talking. They charged him with extra crimes after the fact. No lawyer, no talking to the parent, no nothing.
And that's my deal. That right there, that situation where a kid, and I looked this up in the rules to see, and the truth is a minor can absolutely waive their rights. They can talk to police. They can do other things that under normal situations, I would tell my child, do not do that. Shut your mouth. Wait till you talk to a lawyer. And that's how we're going to handle this. And that to me is suspicious.
And I was able to, we got him at Bradford, 17 years old. He's now 39, got 2 kids. We've gone on with life. But I am also the one who reached out to you a couple of days ago after the holidays with the DCS stuff, with exactly what you're talking to. I have a plethora of experience.
Sure.
We need, you gave me your number, that's fine, well and good, but we need to have a discussion. I have already contacted my legislators. I have already gone the gamut. I just need, as you see, I'm emotional.
Sure.
I need somebody that can talk. I think I sent you a thing. I need a mouthpiece because I get emotional. I'm very passionate. As I said, he's 17. He was 17. He's 39. We've adopted children. I have worked for DCS. We are in a mess.
Yeah.
And it depends on, just as you said about different counties. From region to region, it depends on where you go as to what their policies are. That should not be.
Well, Teresa, we'll follow up on this. Thank you for your call. And, give me some time on the holidays. I care about this. And I'm willing to lend my voice to it because we need a state solution on this. These are the most vulnerable kids, right? A lot of these kids that are in this bad way. The reason we have a juvenile justice system And again, I want to say that the judge over in Franklin is fantastic. The reason that we have a system like this is because we treat minors differently. We do. And we want to get them moving in the right direction on the right path. That's why my family fosters in the first place, is to give kids a chance. And so we've decided as a state, we want to have a juvenile justice facility process. So instead of cutting parents off right out of the gates, it should be, okay, you can talk to your parents. Let's figure out a game plan. Let's move in a positive direction, figure out what the consequences have to be, what the process needs to be here in this juvenile proceeding. That's the game plan. And I think that we do wrong by the kids and by the families when we don't see the distinction here. And I'm telling you, the idea that you would not have the ability to speak to your kid and they could say things that could create legal jeopardy for them is unconscionable. And we need it stopped. And if the legislature's not willing to listen to this, maybe they will, and it's their kid that gets picked up. It's easy to look the other way because you're like, it's not mine. Well, someday it might be. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. I appreciate you guys engaging this topic. I know it's a little bit wonky, but I think all of you should want to know that if your kid gets picked up, you can't talk to them. It's kind of a thing. It shouldn't be a thing. I've got a couple callers on this issue. We'll get you on the next side in this next hour. We still got to talk Hamas and why we should not be. We should believe what they say about Israel and not be liberals who don't take them at their word. We're going to talk immigration. I want to talk actual policy solutions. But right now, we got to take the break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show, and this is Super Talk 99.7.
From ABC News, I'm Dave Packer. A mass shooting in Prague has left more than a dozen dead, say police in the Czech Republic. More from ABC's Lama Hassan in London.
We understand that according to Prague's medical rescue services, 15 people have been killed and 24 injured. 11 of them are seriously wounded. The university is very close to the iconic Charles Bridge, which is a major landmark in Prague. The area would have been packed with tourists, especially now just before the holidays.
Police say the shooter was a man from a village outside of Prague who was a student at Charles University, where the incident took place. Here at home, a drive-by shooting in Washington, D.C. has left 4 people shot, 1 dead. Police say it happened today in southwest D.C., just a few hundred feet from the Nationals ballpark. Police say the shooter was in a white Jeep Cherokee, no suspect in custody. Days after he was ordered to pay 2 Georgia women close to $150 million for defaming them, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
The former mayor tells the bankruptcy court he has anywhere from $1 to $10 million in assets, but liabilities in excess of $100 million. And among his unsecured creditors, Rudy Giuliani lists Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, and the $148 million he now owes the 2 former Georgia election workers as a result of last week's jury verdict here in Washington.
ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy. Southern California is getting battered by an El Nino-looking powerful storm on this first day of winter. ABC's Alex Stone in Southern California.
Overnight, extreme rainfall in Ventura County brought knee-high floodwaters into some intersections and neighborhoods. Firefighters had to help people out of their cars and their apartments. That water receded quickly once the rain slowed down, but there is more rain coming in this days-long storm, so the threat is not over yet.
House Speaker Mike Johnson sent a letter to President Biden today urging executive action on the border. This as the governor of Texas, without warning, sent a jet load of migrants to Chicago. You're listening to ABC News.
Welcome back. Thank you for all your comments on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. That's 615-737-9986. On the text line, y'all have given me a couple of things to think about, and I appreciate that. First, I don't think that jumping immediately into a lawsuit over a policy that seems problematic on its face, I think that is certainly a recourse, but I'm not sure that that's a good starting point. The biggest issue is drawing attention to it, because this is what happens. Everybody says they care about the Constitution, they care about civil liberties, but when those liberties matter the most is when folks are cross with the government. Okay? Those are situations of arrest. It's when it may not even be that. It may just be being pulled over and detained. It may be when you're saying something that a politician doesn't like. I'll tell you, I've been sued. I won, but I've had politicians sue me for calling them to account for their comments. There was a Democratic school board member in the state of Alabama who she said that they should, on video, that they should take special needs kids out of the classroom and put them in institutions. And she frankly didn't know what she was talking about, didn't understand what we've tried to do with education, which is not take special needs kids out of the normal, traditional education environment, but try to mainstream them. That's been a policy objective for a long time. She didn't know that, but she said this, and I said that she wanted to institutionalize special needs kids because it's what she said on the video, and she sued me. Made my life a living hell for several years, and then we won the case. We won before the Alabama Supreme Court. I'm now, unfortunately, part of First Amendment case law in the state of Alabama, and then she died. And the moral of the story is don't sue me or you might die. So just throwing that out there. If anybody's getting wild. But the big issue is that when people find themselves, particularly in a place like Williamson County, where you got a lot of folks who have been successful professionally, that have opportunity and education and success, and then their kid does something that runs afoul of the legal system, well, that's embarrassing. We don't want to talk. Sure. We can't talk to him for a day. Fine. Let's keep walking. No, absolutely not. Like you have to explain to me why this is constitutional, why this is permissible, and even why this is necessary as a matter of public policy. Because the fact that the voters in Williamson County don't even know about this stuff and are not even aware. And when told, this was the issue that drove me. I mean, you want to talk about setting me off. When I raised this, the director of juvenile services, who said, we have to balance the rights of the child in custody against public safety. First of all, that's just fluff. It means nothing. She also said, after telling me, we'll discuss this later. No, we won't. Or we can. We'll discuss it on the radio right now. She said that as a foster parent, my parental rights weren't the same. Okay, cool. That's not what the policy says. But she said it. And she was not particularly kind about it, of saying, well, you're not a real parent. Yeah, I am. And sure, there are structural differences in who's responsible for what. I get that. But the ability to have somebody that lives at my house that I can't talk to and make sure that they're safe and that they're not being interrogated, that they're not having somebody in their face, that they're in a good situation, relatively speaking. You know, don't tell me that I'm not a real parent, because I've got biological kids that this policy applies to too. And that's the kind of stuff that drives me insane, because we should have these discussions. We should have them out and say, is this acceptable? Is this what we want? Folks in Williamson County, folks in other counties around Tennessee, folks in the state legislature, is that what you want? Do you really want a situation where parents are detached from their kids for 24 hours in a situation of serious legal jeopardy as a matter of public policy? I think that's garbage. It's hot, steamy garbage, and it needs to be addressed and fixed, and I'm going to write about it, and I'm going to talk about it, because on the uncomfortable day where you get a phone call like I did that the police have picked up your child, I hope you can talk to them. I hope you can hear their voice, know they're okay, tell them to shut their mouths and chill out for a minute. I really do. And again, I respect that law enforcement has a job to do, that judges have a job to do, that there's nobody here that's saying, I hate kids or, I want to hurt people. But sometimes people with good intentions have bad and potentially unconstitutional policies. Democrats do it all the time. They mean well. They're like, well, hate speech, hate this, hate that. We need to have speech codes. It's actually okay. We can restrict more speech. No is the answer. Even on gun control, that's a good example. Democrats say, well, we're well-intentioned. We don't want people to die. We need to infringe this constitutional right a little bit, just cause. The answer? No. We want to make sure that those civil liberties are protected all the time. And this is a case where, okay, let's at least have the conversation. I don't want to be told, hey, we'll talk about it later. It'll be fine. Daniel in Clarksville, he's got a comment on this. Daniel, what you got?
Yes, sir. First off, big fan of the show. I'll try to make this quick. Currently in law enforcement here in Montgomery County, and whenever we run across juvenile offenders, I don't want to hang on to your kid and keep them from you, because that's just more time that I have to take away from conducting other law enforcement duties.
Sure.
So generally, we would contact the parent, and then we would have to make a call to see if a judge is wanting that juvenile detained or not. But in no way do we, do we tell the parent, hey, you can't come see your kid. That's, as a parent, a new parent myself, that's just insane to me. I don't know where they're getting that policy from.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I've got it in writing in front of me. That's the Williamson County rules of, juvenile justice procedure. That's their
but then
policy.
It doesn't match with the state law, which is, I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, I've pointed out. I said, I actually told him, I said, do you know what the state rules say about this thing? And the Tennessee rules of juvenile justice practice and procedure are unambiguous. That a detained child has the right to communicate with the child's attorney and parent, guardian, or other custodian, and that provision will be made by the detention facility to allow for such private communication. That's the rule. And their rules are inconsistent, and I'm pointing it out. So I appreciate you letting me know that other counties and other areas do it right. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for the call.
Yes, sir.
Hey, and that's what I want to know, because this seems weird. And when something seems weird and potentially unconstitutional, we should wave our hands and say, what is going on, folks? If you are a parent, you need to call your elected officials at the state legislature, at the folks at the county, but let them know, hey, I heard this. Is this the policy? Yeah, they'll send you a copy. Well, then we shouldn't have that policy. I don't care about the other rules. The other rules make sense. I'm sorry, when you get picked up, you can't have cigarettes as a minor. They confiscate that kind of stuff. Okay, fine. These are all reasonable rules. All personal property will be taken upon intake into the Williamson County Juvenile Justice Center. No smoking, no outside food, gum, or candy will be allowed. Vandalism will not be tolerated. Okay, all of that stuff seems pretty standard. But then we get down to, but you can't talk to your parents for 24 hours. That is nuts. And then the clarification, and I'll read the quote I got back, because I've got a piece that I've drafted that I'm about to run over at the Tennessean. Here was the statement of the Williamson County Juvenile Court. Williamson County Juvenile Court's policy exceeds the minimum standard set by the state of one phone call and one visit per week. Detained youth are provided daily contract visits with parents and guardians during visitation hours and daily phone calls to a parent or guardian. It is also important to note youth are provided unlimited access to attorneys, clergy staff, medical, and DCS caseworkers. So when you get nailed on something, this is what the response looks like. This is a very lawyered response. And this is coming from a lawyer because the court doesn't say anything about the 24-hour contract prohibition for parents or guardians. And it is absolutely absurd to say, well, don't worry, mom and dad are prohibited access, but the attorney, a pastor, staff, medical, and DCS caseworkers, they're all cool. Really? Like, do you know anything about DCS?
Couldn't you have claimed to have been his attorney?
Well, no, I actually asked. I said, I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Tennessee, so can I engage him now? Well, you're not his attorney. I'm like, so I need to execute a retainer with myself? Like, what, huh?
Government.
But they're like, no, his attorney. I'm like, well, he has a guardian ad litem, but we'll have to get a hold of them and it's a 24-hour period. So getting a hold of an attorney, or should I call a pastor to come check on him and then communicate through this is the kind of asinine bureaucracy that we're being asked to deal with. And I think that you guys, this is a perfect example of policy close to home. Like, I get it. We can talk about border policy and foreign policy and economic policy. Look, this is a policy where if you live in Williamson County, Tennessee, which is a lot of you that can hear me right now, and your kid gets picked up, they can hold them for 24 hours without any contact with you. And if you're cool with that, then just keep on walking. Don't call Jack Johnson. Don't call your representatives. Don't call Governor Lee's office. But if you think that's a little bit bonkers and maybe it shouldn't be that way, then you should do something about it, because someday you might get a call. Again, I hope you don't. But it's best to deal with these kind of policies before that happens to you. And I got 4 boys in my house, and I know a lot of the law enforcement in Nolensville, and they're pretty great. And most of the time on most issues, I'm going to get a call. They're going to show up. I've had other sons that have had some challenges and anger issues and other things that weren't great. And that's part of fostering. That's part of what we do. And I can tell you unequivocally that the law enforcement, the police department in Nolensville, Tennessee, has been absolutely wonderful. And there have been some real embarrassing situations where I'm running off through the woods behind a restaurant in Nolensville, chasing down a son who's off his rocker. And I've had the police show up with the flashlights and their hands on their guns. And, I'll tell you what, every single time they've been excellent. Every single time. They've helped out and been great. But this is one policy in one facility that I think's got it wrong, and it's real wrong, and it's a big problem. So I don't want to beat it to death any more than I have, but it's that important. I want you guys to hear it. I want you guys to understand it. And frankly, I think we need to do something about it, especially when I'm getting calls from law enforcement folks in other counties that are like, that's insane. We don't do it that way. Like, I agree. I think it's insane, and I don't think we should do it that way either. And I want to let you guys know. We got to take a break. We'll get on to some other topics. I really appreciate you focusing on this issue. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. Again, I appreciate all of you reaching out and paying attention. This is, like I said, this is like a crazy, it might sound like a little thing. Hey, it's only 24 hours. What's the big deal? I'll tell you what the big deal is that you got a kid in legal jeopardy who can waive their rights, and I got to trust that the folks at a facility are going to do what they're supposed to do, and they're not going to create a worse situation. And again, it's not that anybody there is bad. It's just that that's not how it works. Like, for example, if an adult is arrested, they're entitled to effective assistance of counsel. You can't just say, well, we can do whatever we want, just trust us. No, there's certain procedures and constitutional rights that attach. That's reality. I don't care whether it's convenient or fun for law enforcement. That's how we have to do it. That's the process. Like you don't lose your rights just because somebody, has the feels and they want to change public policy. I think that, and a lot of y'all have suggested lawsuits, and I hear you on lawsuits, but this is where I think the right answer and the more permanent solution is to address this as a matter of public policy. And to ask the governor and the legislature and other folks to clarify that parents have a right. They don't have a right to take their kids out of a lockup. They have a right to talk to them. That needs to be real clear. And I don't care who you are and what the situation is. If your kids got picked up at a party that, maybe they shouldn't have been there. Maybe they made some bad decisions. Maybe they hang around some bad folks. Maybe they, are smoking drugs or doing something. I don't care what it is.
They also need to get rid of that policy that a child can waive their own rights. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. Like, that's what shocked me was that, wait a minute, you're telling me a kid who's 13 can talk to police and that those things can be used against them?
Yeah, that's absurd.
And so, and maybe I'm just missing something. I'm not a juvenile justice attorney. And I'm aware of situations where information can be thrown out, but these are minors. Okay, one of the things about minors that we've got to understand is we don't let them enter into contracts. We don't let them do a lot of things. They can't vote. They can't do a lot. Why? One, they have underdeveloped brains, but two, they don't have enough life experience to make a lot of the good decisions, particularly not from a nuanced legal scenario. We tell them their whole lives, hey, if a police officer asks you questions, you should be compliant and respect authority and all that stuff, and that's fine. But then they're in a situation of legal jeopardy, and they think, well, hey, it's actually in my best interest to trust this guy and tell him exactly what I think happened, or, give them more information. And the answer from a just straight up legal scenario, and you're in a situation where you need defense, is to shut up. Don't tell them. Don't say anything. Talk to a lawyer. And so my point is, they're a minor, so they can't make a lot of decisions. So they might want to consult a parent. That's sort of like phone a friend. I'm not saying that they have to. I'm simply saying that as a parent, I should have the right to reach into that scenario, talk to my child and say, I do not want you speaking to anyone. Until we get your attorney here to help you with this process, you don't speak to anyone.
You can arrest a child for underage drinking and then turn around and allow that child who's not old enough to drink you're expecting them to be intelligent enough to know when or when to not waive their own rights. That's just absolutely crazy to me.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the issue is we can't be in a situation where we're doing this type of stuff without some parental involvement. Like, that's just insane. So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm throwing out there is that we need to have a serious look at this as a matter of public policy. And in a lot of cases, children are not held. They're not. So you can tell me, well, this isn't really a thing. It is when it is, right? And that's part of the challenge. And so That to me is what we're talking about. This is Tennessee Rules of Civil Procedure. I don't want to call this out. This is C2D says the right not to say anything about the charges being placed against the child, and that anything the child says may be used against the child in court. I mean, that seems like a thing. And then it's saying, well, this child has this right not to say anything, and that if you do, it can be used against you. And then E is what I read earlier, the right to communicate with the child's attorney and parent, guardian, or other custodian, and the provision will be made by the detention facility to allow for such private communication. And what Williamson County has done is they played games here. And they've said, well, we'll create provisions for that communication in our rules, but after the first 24 hours. Those first 24 hours are critical. Because you got, as a parent, as a lawyer, you're saying, okay, I need to know what happened, what's going on, who do I need to talk to, what other information do I need relevant to somebody's defense. That is absolutely critical. And that's not happening. It's not happening in this concept. And the idea of, I want to be clear here, because in a juvenile justice facility, in a system like this, the goal is not to play gotcha with these kids. It's to keep the public safe and to create a system where we can move these kids in a positive direction. That's it. And so that's something that matters to me. It should matter to you. And when we see a weird wrinkle like this, instead of being quiet and saying, well, it's kind of embarrassing to talk about. No, it's not. It's really important to talk about. And I hope some of you guys are picking up the phone. You can go to votesmart.org. If you want to find your elected officials, you can put in your zip code, and you need to ask them about this policy. You need to say, well, I heard on the radio that Williamson County has this policy where parents are cut off for 24 hours. What are you going to do about that? Do I have a policy in my county about that? Are we cut off or not? And y'all should call them. Y'all should tell them, and you should say, what in the world is going on? Because this is a crackerjack world, and when we have policies like this at home, we can actually do something about them. Right now, what I got to do is take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. And I want to we'll get to a couple of the calls, and I want to tell you why we do what we do on there, why we address these issues of public policy and get into the weeds and do this stuff, because it freaking matters. Because you know what? The folks that represent you, they pay attention to you on this station. I just got an email from Jack Johnson saying, hey, this is the first I've heard of this policy. We need to talk. It matters, folks. Your comments, your engagement here, it's a big deal. And so I want to look out for your rights. I want to look out for your kids' rights, even when it's a rough day, because you know what? That's when those rights matter. On good days, it doesn't matter. You know, on days where nobody's trying to infringe my speech or my religious expression, on those easy days, it's easy not to care. It's on the rough days that you really need to care, and it's always better to address it before you get there. So I appreciate you guys engaging and reaching out. We've got David from Smyrna has been on hold for a minute. David, what you got?
Hey, thanks for taking my call. First of all, thank you so much for the job you're doing. I love it when you get critical, deep conversation that's very thoughtful. On this, I also want to give you a devil's advocate point of view.
Fair.
Perhaps policies put in place to help diffuse situations. I mean, I wonder how many times they have to deal with, well, my baby didn't do nothing.
Sure.
You've got to let it go now.
Yeah. I hear you. I think that's certainly part of it.
But could be. The other thing I think I heard you mention about, teaching your children to be compliant to law enforcement and to always listen to them and things like that. I agree with you, but I also think it's very, very important to teach your children that other than the casual interaction of, gee, officer, I hope it doesn't rain today and I hope you're having a good day, your interactions with police officers are confrontational. Their job is to make arrests, not to find the truth. And I think it's very, very important to teach children that.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Thank you, David, for the call. And I understand the position. Here's where I want to put a little wrinkle on that one. Is, as a lawyer, I'm a nerd. I teach my kids about, hey, well, this could happen and these things could happen. That, law enforcement, the police officers that you encounter, they're there to protect public safety. It's their job to enforce the law. It's their job to stop people from committing crimes. They see something that doesn't look right. They make a judgment call to the best of their abilities. And the reason that police officers are not like Judge Dredd is because sometimes they get it wrong, right? Sometimes they make a call, they arrest somebody, they didn't have all the evidence, they didn't properly look at this or that, and that's part of the process. That's okay. I teach my kids to be respectful of police officers, but for a couple reasons. One, police have a pretty tough job. They got to make some of these calls, and then everybody looks at them different than any other job. When I walk down the street, nobody looks at me and says, I better be on my best behavior because that person's around. They engage me as they actually are versus some sort of fake version of themselves. But I also think that hostility doesn't always go well. And there's always a time to make the legal arguments. And sometimes, and I was blunt like this with, I had an African-American son in my house. And I said, look, man, it's not fair, but you're a big, strong young man and your skin looks different than mine. And so you need to be real careful in how you engage, and I have your back. Like, we will make the legal arguments, we will make sure, but if a police officer says stop, you stop. And I tell my other sons that. But in that context, like, there's realities, right? That, hey, that son, where we live, somebody sees a young black man in the community that they don't know, those dynamics are there. And you can say, well, that's not right, that's wrong, that's racism, that's this, that. Hey, that's fair. I think compliance with law enforcement in a way that's respectful and engaging is really important. And then make the constitutional rights when you're safe. And so you don't put them in a position where things can escalate. Because, and I can do this all the time because I know the law, I know my constitutional rights, I can articulate and litigate them far better than almost anybody in law enforcement. That's just the reality. They didn't go to law school, I did. But if I decide that I want to have it out with them and be like, heck no, you can't do that, and I escalate the scenario, I may win the legal argument, but that doesn't do much good if I get shot. I would prefer not to get tased. And so I think that I hear you, and I hear arguments of, well, you need to teach them this and that. Look, most police officers are not looking to arrest you. They're not looking, that it is not their job to arrest random innocent people. If you tell a police officer, hey, I'm thinking I may go shoot somebody, they're going to raise an eyebrow. You might have some challenges. But generally speaking, engaging law enforcement, treating them respectfully, being nice to them. My kids go to police camp, so they know these police officers, because when you have a bunch of boys in your house, it's real important that they have a prior relationship so that when they get pulled over or something happens, they're saying, oh, hey, Officer Pickle. Say, well, you're going a little fast. And there's a rapport and a relationship. It's disarming. Now, they may still get a ticket, but, it's not that adversarial thing. And I think one of the best things communities can do is help foster that relationship between law enforcement and the community. We did, when I lived in Alabama, we did this thing called cop stops. And we would have police officers at our house, and we'd feed them, particularly like late shift guys, and just say, hey, thank you for keeping us safe. And they would tell us some really funny stories. They'd say, when you guys are asleep, some weird stuff happens. And, they would, where we lived a couple miles down the road, there's a hotel off 65, and it was kind of for lack of a better word, a swingers hotel. And there were a lot of really weird stories of naked people running around that they would regale us with. Thankfully, we were feeding them when our other kids were asleep, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But, you want to take care of those folks because they take care of your community, but you also need to be aware that, hey, they're there with legal power, and it matters. And so you should be mindful of that, and it's silly not to. TJ in Pulaski has something on the juvenile justice. TJ, thanks for waiting. What you got?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're on there.
I just want to say that I agree with everything that you're saying. I think it goes by county, not necessarily the state, which it should be a state law.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it should be something, because in Murray County, just like my kid, he's 19 years old now. At 17, he had some underage drinking stuff at the party and all that good stuff. But when the deputies come to the house, I was up in the house sleeping, and they started questioning all the kids, and there was something about 15 or 20 kids there, and I questioned him. I was like, doesn't a parent or a guardian or somebody have to be here before you start questioning them? And then at the end of the day, they asked if I wanted to press charges against the deputy. And I'm all for law enforcement, all that stuff. But, there's got to be something statewide.
Yeah, I agree.
Code. It can't be a county code that says this is what we're going to do. We're going to question kids and not let their parents talk to them for 24 hours. That's just BS.
Yeah, I agree, TJ.
Yeah, so, I'm totally with you on that. It's a disgrace that Williamson County has adopted that code, because I'm pretty sure it's not a state code.
No, it's not. It's the facility rules. That's all it is. But it's facility rules that matter, because when your kid's in that facility, and that's a problem.
Yeah, when they're underage, they shouldn't be able to question them whatsoever.
Yeah, and you know what their response was to me on that? They said, oh, don't worry, we didn't. And I said, well, wait a minute. Like, I hear you, and I trust that you're not lying to me, but I shouldn't have to trust you. Like, I should be able to talk to my kid and say, hey, did they ask you any questions? No. Okay, cool.
That's right. They shouldn't be able to take a minor into custody and question them whatsoever unless a parent or guardian or their attorney is there present. I'm pretty sure that's a state law.
Right. This is my point, TJ.
By the end of it, the end of the night, my kid was in the wrong, no doubt. There was underage drinking. It was 2:00 in the morning. They had a party down there at the shop. But by the end of the night, the proceeding officer the leading officer, he was like, "You want to press charges against this deputy for questioning your kids?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I just don't want them messing with the kids." You know what I mean? They did wrong. I'll take care of it, because all their parents was there. There was like 15, 16 kids there, and all their parents was there. And I was like, "We'll handle the situation," you know?
Yeah.
But they questioned all of our kids without us being there. And in Murray County, I know for a fact that it was against the law for them to question our kids without either a parent being there, legal guardian, or a lawyer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That should be a state code. I don't know why Williamson County should be any different.
Well,
I mean, that's just crazy to me, and it's straight BS.
Well, I appreciate the call, TJ. Yeah, well, sometimes folks in Williamson County, we think we're a little special. And I can tell you, as far as the Constitution is concerned, we're not. And it should apply to everybody. And and I understand. I understand one of the considerations, because I think it's really important in these scenarios where I see it with real clarity to talk about, the devil's advocate, to be on the other side. I'm sure some parents, when their kid gets in trouble, want to come down there and murder their kid. I mean, they get real upset, they get real fired up, but you know what? You know what's illegal for them to do? Murder their kid. They can't do that. And if they come down there and hurt the kid or do anything that is illegal, they should be arrested. Again, they're in a facility with law enforcement, so I think that should be pretty straightforward. And so I think I understand where folks would say, man, we want to give the parents some time to settle their emotions and kind of figure that is noble. I still don't think it's constitutional, but I think that parents have to learn to control themselves. And, I'll be the first to say, I was a little fired up because they treat the director there was incredibly offensive. I'm going to just put a fine point on it. I mean, she basically talked down to me like I had no clue what I was asking for. And I said, as a matter of law, you're required, if you have a policy, to show it to me. That's the law in Tennessee. And she just dismissed me as some sort of emotionally distraught parent. And I was actually more distraught that I don't like being dismissed by a bureaucrat who doesn't follow the law. It gets me kind of hot and bothered in a bad way. So, I mean, this is really important stuff, and I appreciate y'all taking it seriously. And Ray's on the line and says, hey, have you spoken? I said, look, Senator Jack Johnson reached out and said, hey, let's talk. So, yeah, we're going to talk. And we're going to figure out, hey, what's going on? And what do we got to do to make this right? But it shouldn't be, like TJ said, it shouldn't be county to county or community to community, or certainly not facility to facility. It should be, do you really need us to clarify this as a matter of law?
They also need to have some legislation written up about children not being able to waive their rights.
Yeah.
I mean, that needs to be in this next General Assembly. If it's not, that's just insane to me.
Yeah. Well, if you can't enter into a contract,
you
can't vote, you shouldn't be able to waive any rights either.
If you can't drive a car and you get arrested for driving underage, you shouldn't be able to waive your rights to the crime.
Right.
Or about the crime.
Well, and I know that, again, and some people say, well, it's a juvenile proceeding, so it's like less serious in terms of some of the...
Doesn't matter.
I'm getting to that. It doesn't. It's irrelevant. It is a matter of, these are legal violations. Minors are charged with them. They have hearings. And the idea that, well, we don't want... I just think that, yeah, we have different goals in the juvenile system than the adult system. That we have and that we want these kids to get a chance to get it right before they become adults, and these consequences get much more severe. However, I don't think the state's obligation should change in terms of, you need to respect the rights of somebody that's accused of breaking the law.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And so I agree with you. I do not think that minors should be able to waive their rights. I don't think that, and I don't care if a kid comes in there and he's off his rocker and he says, well, I did this and I'm so mad and I did this and here are the exact details, and you shouldn't be able to use that against them. Because I'll just be blunt. Teenage guys are dumb. Teenagers generally make some decisions. Their brains are not fully developed, and I've seen way too many people get hot and make some dumb calls. Now, my son didn't. by all accounts. That's great, and that goes to his character, and I'm excited about that. But other folks do, and then, man, you're in a bad way, and I don't like that at all. We got Mike from South Pittsburgh on the line. Mike, we only got about 2 minutes, so let's go.
How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, Mike.
My only encounter with the police, I'm going on 70 now, but I was 9 or 10. Me and my buddy chiseled out a window in the local elementary school that we went to. It was back when they puttied the windows in.
Yeah.
And we took it out in the woods and broke it. And we're walking around the neighborhood, and this police officer stops, and obviously the janitor ID'd us. And the police officer stopped and said, "Hey, boys, I got in touch with your parents, and they said to take you guys for some ice cream." And we're saying, "Hey, that's cool." Yeah, so we get in the back of the cruiser, and our countenance changed a little bit when he pulled into the school parking lot where we took that window out. And we spent the rest of the summer picking up trash and working for that janitor that ID'd us.
Woo!
And our parents were all for it.
Yeah.
No arrest, nothing like that, just pure discipline. But we never did get that ice cream, and I hope that cop knows that.
Well, I appreciate the call, Travis. I think that's sorry, I appreciate the call. I think Travis was on the line. Sorry, I messed it up. I'm not trying to insulate anybody from consequences. Like, kids should have consequences. That's part of the problem is we play with kid gloves, and then we say, okay, no consequences for anybody. That's a huge problem. I'm saying you should have consequences. You should just have your rights protected in that process.
And if you as a police officer promise a kid some ice cream, you should have to follow through.
You have to deliver that ice cream. You want them to trust you. So I get that. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Dog 99.7. welcome back. Time flies when you're having fun. And we are having fun. I appreciate all your insights on the text line and your calls. Y'all have been excellent. 615-737-9986. 615-737-9986. I think we have time to get to Travis from Manchester on the juvenile justice issues. Travis, we don't have much time, but tell me what you got.
I'll make this really quickly. Thank you for taking my call, first of all. But
No problem.
I just want to say that it's amazing to me how many people don't actually know their rights. And
Truth.
There are some police officers out there that will give you unlawful orders that a lot of people will comply with simply because they don't know their rights. And I'm not really sure what the juvenile justice policy is in Coffee County where I live, but this is why I hammer home to my kids that if you ever have any type of interaction with law enforcement, you are to be respectful and you are to be compliant because you do not want to escalate the situation, but do not answer any questions under any circumstances until they allow you to speak to your parents or your attorney. No matter how bad they make it sound, no matter how much they threaten you,
sure,
you do not answer questions, period, because that 24-hour period, man, that's a golden opportunity for law enforcement to really interrogate that child and jam them up in a bad situation simply because they don't know any better. And so I think it's important that we all teach our children that you do not answer questions no matter what.
Yeah,
no matter what they threaten you with.
Yeah, I appreciate the call, Travis. I think there's some truth there. What I will say is the problem is, well, what happens when you have the good police officers? For example, in the Williamson County Juvenile Justice Facility that my son was picked up with, they said, well, we didn't talk to him or nobody interrogated him. And I believe them. I really do. I shouldn't have to, because writing policies for the good guys is not the problem. The reason you have policies is for the folks that don't do what they're supposed to, for the folks that go in there and say, okay, I'm going to sort of scare this kid and see if they'll tell me a little bit more. It's not the good guys that are the problem. It's the ones who aren't. And the fact that I shouldn't, as a parent, have to take their word for it. I want to reiterate that, other than my sort of rough encounter with the director of the facility, the judges were great. The law enforcement folks were great. Everybody else was fantastic. I don't think that this is a corrupt individual's problem. I think it's a dumb policy problem. And I think it is fair to say to a kid, be respectful, be kind, but just say, I'd really like to talk to my parents. I'd really like to talk to my parents. And just say that repeatedly. And then when a parent's there, then, hey, you can work it out. I think that's how it must be handled. And the goal, again, is not for the state to step in as a parent. It's, hey, we have laws. We need to protect public safety. We need to make sure everybody's okay. There have to be consequences for decisions, but the whole goal of the system is to get these kids moving in a better direction, to help them move past trauma and other issues into better behaviors that don't end up with them in jail. We got another hour, folks. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Two o'clock, I'm Mac Morey with your top stories right now. 55 degrees in Nashville. Latest forecast coming up in 2 minutes. More than 15 people killed after a shooting in Prague in the Czech Republic, according to the Prague head of police today, who also says there is no indication that there was any political or terrorism motive for the shooting. Police say the gunman was a 24-year-old man from a village outside of Prague. He was a student at Charles University, where the incident took place. Lama Hassan has more from London.
What we do know, and again, this is coming from the head of police, they believe the shooter was inspired by similar mass shootings that have happened in other countries abroad. And I'm sure we'll get more information as the police investigate this incident, which has become the worst deadly shooting since its independence about 30 years ago, since the country's independence.
And if you drive a Honda or Acura, you'll want to hear about a new recall. Here's Alex Stone.
Owners won't be officially notified until February, but Honda announcing it is recalling 2.6 million Honda and Acura vehicles, a wide array of models from years 2017 to 2020. The worry is the fuel pump may fail, causing the engine to stall while driving, which could lead to a crash. It'll be fixed by dealerships for free. It comes one day after Toyota announced it's recalling 1 million Toyota and Lexus vehicles because airbags might not trigger.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Welcome back for the final hour of the Matthew Murphy Show. Matt Murphy Show. We'll go with that. It's been fun. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt. I usually join Matt on Wednesdays. For you people who are into reading things and knowing stuff, I write a column over at the Tennessean, and I'm on the editorial board over there. Yes, it's shocking, I know. There is conservative voice, and they don't even beat me much. It's great. I also write for AL.com, and I hang out in Franklin with the team at Thanks, and man, we have fun this time of year. It's where people start thinking about appreciation a little more, and some of you guys have had hilarious suggestions of awful things that you've been given at work to show appreciation. I want to talk about that a little bit this hour. I want to wrap up and put a bow on the conversation about juvenile justice system, Williamson County policies. We need to fix it. We will. We'll get this squared away. I don't think that this is a one that's particularly controversial. I think that we can get this clarified across the state. I think our elected representatives are smart enough to see that, hey, you know, when it comes to juveniles, they should have access to their parents. Those parents can't act like fools, but they should have access to their parents. They should be able to have that competent, steady counsel. I understand not every parent does that, but most parents are smart enough to say, hey, I got you. You know, you may have to stay overnight. You may, depending on the gravity of the situation, some kids do some really bad stuff, and maybe they have to stay a little bit longer until we kind of figure out what's going on. We get legal representation attached. Like, you know, but we got to be common sense about this. We got to make good calls, good decisions. Again, through all of this, there should be a legal process. We got to enforce our laws. We got to protect our communities. There should be consequences for bad decisions that are contrary to law. However, when it comes to minors, it's a different level of care. It's a different standard. That doesn't mean that they don't have constitutional rights, and we should be mindful of that. And that's all I'm asking for, and I think you guys, from our conversation, seem to agree with me on that, and I appreciate you reaching out. You can, an easy way to get a hold of me, too, is at D. Cameron Smith on X. I have a Threads account, too, but I don't really know how to use
Formerly
Threads.
known as Twitter.
Yeah, formerly known as Twitter. Whatever. I'm on Facebook. My only rule with Facebook is I have to know you in person. Like, we have to have at least said hello to be Facebook friends. But, like, with X and stuff, just join the conversation. Hit me up if you got information that you think we need to track down, something that's happening. Somebody said a mouthpiece. One of the best things that I can do as a columnist and somebody in the media that does fill-in radio, other stuff like that, is give voice to folks that don't have a voice, right? And help shine light in places that are dark. And I think one of the things that has been really important for me is I'm really competitive, right? I want conservative ideas. I want Republicans to be way better than our political opposition. When I see folks, you know, on the left lecturing us about liberties and all these things, I'm like, no, we should be better than that. We should be the best. When somebody thinks of who's going to defend my rights, should be a Republican. We should be unmistakable about that. When the moments where we get like, no, maybe we should use the government to like compromise civil liberties. Nope. We should encourage each other to, you know, be liberty-loving individuals. And that's really important to me. And I don't like, and this is where I might be a little bit weird, I don't like the left winning on issues that we should win on. The hook and bullet conservative was the first conservationist. The person who had a great environmental ethic because they depended on the environment. Pretty conservative. And yet it's the left who wins on all the environmental issues. They are the ones that say they care about it the most. We should win that. When it comes to, you know, I've mentioned the issues at DCS and talked about those and our need to get it right and do it right and not just do hand-wavy, you know, fig leaf coverage type stuff. Like, it shouldn't be Heidi Campbell and the Democrats that are leading on DCS issues. It should be Republicans. It should be Governor Lee, the Republicans in the legislature that say, no, we're going to get this right. We've had plenty of time to let this languish, and it's a problem in so many states. But we're going to get it right. We're going to take care of these kids because, yeah, you know what? We are pro-life. And it matters all along the way. And the scariest thing in the world should be the state, any state, the government raising kids. No, we're going to ask you for your help. We want private citizens. We want other folks to help raise these kids. Because for one reason or another, the folks that gave birth to them, those folks don't have the ability to take care of them. So be it. But the answer can't be, well, more state, more government. Let's do more bureaucracy. Let's give them give them the bureaucracy. That'll fix. Nobody actually believes that. And so on these issues, when I bring them up, it's not just generally for my own edification. It's because I believe that we have to win on these issues that matter to everyday people, and particularly the most vulnerable people. The left loves that word, vulnerable. Well, the most vulnerable, the vulnerable, the vulnerable. You know what? I see vulnerable. And they're right when it comes to kids. And we should step up in a big way, because you want to challenge woke culture, then you raise them. Then you teach them. You know what I don't have a problem with in my house? Woke culture. Like, not even a little. Like, my 9-year-old is talking to me about, he said, Dad, I think tax should be about 10%. It should apply to everybody, and it should be real easy. I don't like it, but, you know, that's what we do at church, so that seems like maybe that'd be fair. I love those conversations, and we need to do that, but you got to teach them. You got to show them the way they should go. So the idea that we're going to leave it up to the state to do everything and then hope that things go in a good direction, it's not going to work. Like, you can tell me you get the books out of the libraries at school. You know where kids aren't hanging out anymore? Libraries and schools. They're hanging out on TikTok, man. They're in social media. They're texting with their friends. They're in their Chromebooks. So tell me exactly what it is you want. If you want to go attack that culture, you do it by raising kids. I mean, that's the secret that nobody wants to talk about here. Let's be honest about what happened, because every last one of y'all that can hear the sound of my voice, you know that conservatives have lost the culture. That it's gone wild, and it's gone wild quickly. You know why you lost the culture? Because they were willing to come after our kids and we didn't go after theirs. We opened up pipelines into our homes through those screens and said, come on in. You know, that's one of the things, one of the projects that I work on with some of my friends at Triptych Media. We're making movies. We're making content. There's a lot of folks in Tennessee trying to figure out how do we make content to push back, because we want to feed the pipeline in the opposite direction. Get content in front of people. Get eyeballs on. Because if you want to shape the culture, you shape it in 3 ways. This is unmistakable. I don't care how you feel about it, but if you want to talk about climate change and the LGBTQ, all the acronym stuff, it changed radically in a short amount of time, and the mechanism to do it was the same in both instances. It was media, business, and then public policy. That's how you change culture every time. The left understands that quite well. And it's the same thing of like, well, is that thing you think is bad, is it really bad? And let's make a funny comedy that makes it okay. Makes it seem normal. Okay. Well, hey, businesses, now that this is normal, I mean, don't you want to have policies in your business that don't allow people to have a different view? Don't you think that's probably a good idea if you really care? Hey, legislature, now that, you know, all the people in the business, they kind of all think this, so why don't you just make it a law and start mandating some of this stuff? Y'all see how this goes? That is the way that culture has changed. And if we don't push back by doing the same thing in an opposite direction and saying, hey, you know what? Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to have content. We're going to have things we consume and watch and talk about that are positive and edifying and uplifting. And oh, by the way, they're not terrible. That's one of the things conservative types have always struggled with is, I don't know whether there's something in the water, but there's we'll make sort of versions of things for ourselves that are good, and we'll sell it on things like, you know, we'll say PureFlix, or we'll call it some kind of name that like no teenage boy ever is like, oh yeah, I would love to watch me some Pureness. And then we wonder why we lose to like a steady flow of scantily clad women shaking their bodies in front of our children.
For anybody who thinks you were being hyperbolic, there is a new California law that requires stores to have gender-neutral toy sections.
You see? It's the process. This happens this way. It's a formula because it works. So we must do that. I just don't care. I mean, and I want to be specific. So I get it. Some of these really offensive books in libraries that are sexually explicit are bad and problematic. I'm not suggesting that they're appropriate at all or that we should, that's not a good, fight to have. I'm saying it's not enough. That if you don't have a strategy for engaging media, business, and public policy, and I'm talking all three, one is not sufficient. If you don't say, here's what we want to see, and here's how we're going to do it, then you're just whining while the left steamrolls us. And I'll say there's some factors that are going in our favor. Like Hollywood's not a real thing anymore. Most people don't really know that. Like you can make movies anywhere now. It's cheaper to make content than it ever has been. And the nature of the game is changing. There's so many more things to look at. My sons, we talk about it at the dinner table. They don't actually most of the time want to sit down and watch a movie for several hours. They're watching, Mr. Beast do a thing. Or Mark, Bober, the NASA guy, makes giant squirt guns and explosions and stuff, and they think it's cool. But it's short form content, right? And if you don't have a game plan to engage that mechanism and target the next generation, and guess what, guys? Most of us, I'm 41. Bell can't be older than 42. I wish. Mac is 12. Cumulus has some child labor issues, so don't worry about that. But in this context, if you don't have a game plan to go after, let's say, the crowd that's under 21, you lose every time. You just do. And if you're like, here's your moral fiber, come eat broccoli, you're going to lose. You got to entertain them. You got to make them laugh. You've got to engage them on numerous fronts. And they're not as immature as you think. Like they get a lot of it. They're exposed to a lot more because of the content that they consume. They are a lot smarter, maybe the wrong word, but they're a lot more knowledgeable about what's going on than we give them credit for. And I really limit the screens in my house. I don't want like a cesspool of garbage just dumped through the screens into the floor of my house. So we're real careful with that, but they still, as my kids have gotten older, they get more and more access, and they see that, and man, it's a game changer. I'm telling you guys that, if you're concerned about woke culture and you're concerned about what's going on, then you better be willing to go after the kids. You better be willing to teach them and say, you know what, this is what's right. This is what's right. This is what's important. And and do it in ways that are pretty engaging. Because you know what I know my 14-year-old cares about? What girls think. Like a pretty girl thinks a thing, it is worth 1,000 times more than what his dad thinks. So when we were playing around at dinner the other night, I asked his female cousin, who's about the same age, a couple years older, not the one that smashed his tooth, the other one. I said, what's more impressive to you as a young woman? Because he was making fun of me for quoting Shakespeare. I was like, is it the guy that can quote Shakespeare? Or is it the guy who's really good at Fortnite? I already knew the answer because it was going to be obvious. And she said Shakespeare. And so my son was like, maybe I should think differently about this. And that's what we've got to be like, is what's the game plan here and how do we go after and make gains and not just try to gradually lose slower. I'm not interested in slowly losing. I want to win. And I hope you do too. We got to take a break. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Talk about Hamas, immigration, all kinds of fun stuff on Super Talk 99.7.
House Speaker Mike Johnson demanding that President Biden take executive action to stop what's going on the southern border in a kidnapping in Tennessee. 2:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
And we're back. Welcome back. Thank you guys on the Super Talk text line for all of your encouragement. And have you tried the Mr. Beast chocolate bars? Actually, yes, I have. I think I'm pretty much tried everything Mr. Beast says is a thing.
Really?
Yes.
Nice. Are they good?
They're fine. I mean, I like them, but my boys act
They like Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast things are the best things. And my wife, who actually sometimes does listen to me when I'm on the radio.
That's nice of her.
Yes, it is. It's very nice. She said it's Mark Rober, not Bober. And I needed to get that right.
Mr. Beast is a horrible person.
Okay.
Did you see those wells he dug in Africa?
Why did he dig the wells?
Because people needed clean drinking water. But
Yeah,
he thinks
what
he's
a
special.
jerk.
Yes, I've seen some of the concerns about this man who does random nice things.
He repaired an orphanage. Who does he think he is?
Yeah, it's really interesting when people do nice stuff and then people are like, can you trust this guy? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He does the nice things.
He thinks he's a white savior. No, maybe he just wants to help people.
Sorry. Maybe he thinks people should drink clean water and maybe they don't care whether he's white, black, or whatever. I mean, I would generally be favorably disposed to that. And I think one of the big things that I want to emphasize today is that, like, parenting's weird. All the stuff attendant to that, very strange. Constitutional rights and civil liberties need to be respected across the board, especially when you're dealing with kids, because we need to teach kids what those are. I think a number of you have said, well, nobody knows what their rights are. I think that's a problem, folks. You know, you lose the culture when you think you can just vent your spleen in all context without any restrictions whatsoever. And I'm like, no, you can't. There are time, place, and manner restrictions on the First Amendment. The Second Amendment, while I will protect that with my dying breath, there are contours that the Supreme Court has established there. Like, we need to know and discuss these things. And again, don't just assume your kids are idiots. Teenage boys can be kind of stupid and they can be rather dense, but they can also be thoughtful and they can also understand a lot. And so having these discussions with your kids about the things we talk about on air, that Matt talks about and Chris and Brian, like, don't think your kids can't think through some of these things. And I love talking to my kids about it. One, because it's funny. Occasionally things come out. And, you know, I was talking with my 9-year-old who loves to talk politics, by the way. And Hey who's called the Little Beast. The Little Beast, I was like, well, what do you think about the GOP presidential primary? And he's like, well, I feel like Donald Trump spent a lot of money. And he's also orange. And the orange thing's weird. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. You're definitely a 9-year-old reviewing the political landscape. He's like, why is he orange? I don't understand. And I'm like, okay, that's a thing. But I love it because you get all these cool insights, you know, like what I said about the Little Beast and tax, and they really have an honest take on politics. Like, mostly what my boys think is that, like, a lot of these people who do politics are just kind of weird. He's like, what do they do all day? Do they just, like, talk about things they're upset about and they just, like, walk around and do that? I'm like, I mean, I know they do it online, but I mean, I don't know. Do they walk around? Do you walk? Those of you who are elected officials, do you walk around and be like, I am upset. I am outraged at the thing that I read on Twitter today. According to my boys, that's what politics is letting people know you're upset about things. And we've talked that it's more than that, but It's really important, and I do think that you have to make a play for the future. Newt Gingrich wrote a book about, the fight for the future is the fight. Like, that's what we're actually talking about here. It's like, what's the America that we're going to have? Because all the fear-mongering about democracy being over and, like, all the bad things, it's not like a thing happens and it clicks and it's over, right? It's more death by 1,000 cuts and not teaching people and not raising leaders and them not challenging the wrong direction. And that's what we have to see, and that's what we have to do. And it is important that we point out the things that are wrong, but it's also important that we raise the people that can make it right. And so, like, all you mamas and daddies out there who are teaching your kids, and you wonder if they're listening, and you think they're weird, they smell funny, and they don't like to shower. Sometimes, like, the little beast was running around it was freezing last night, and he was running around shirtless at my parents' little farm with a stick chasing various critters that he was convinced were there. Now, he may need counseling.
How old is he?
9.
That's normal.
He's like, let's go get him. Mike, you are running out in the dark, in the cold, basically in your underwear with a stick to chase whatever.
Totally normal for a 9-year-old.
Yeah. I encourage it. I just laugh at it because I'm like, this is, it's weird because it's not, I don't know. I never really thought about having kids, but now these are the kids that I'm like, I like this. I like how they've turned out. This is neat. This is fun. This is good. But it's a lot of work, and you got to not only be willing to train your kids, but help teach and train other people's kids. And instead, what we have a lot of is, well, don't worry, the government will do it. Let's just make the government do it less bad. Let's have the government not have the weird private part touching books. And winning. And yes, on the super text line, just popped up, I just hate this stuff being advertised to my kids. That's the point. Yeah, you hate it being advertised to your kids. It's not about you, though. Do you think the left and the folks that are pushing this garbage are like, well, I want parents to be okay with it? No, they want to get to your kid first. They want to make sure that and true story. When I worked on Capitol Hill, Google was looking at their parental control stuff, and I knew the Google lobbyist, and I went over there and talked to him, and he said, hey, why don't you try this stuff? And, check it out for us. Let me know what you think. Like, okay, cool. It was parental controls, that sort of thing. And I tried it, and I looked at it, and I said, well, like, where's the part where I can see what my kids are doing on their devices? Like, in detail. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, the part where I can control it, and I can shut down certain things, and I can see what they're browsing and all that stuff. And at the time, he said, well, actually, we have to build a relationship with your child because they're our future client. And we want to make sure that we have a relationship with them, and we wouldn't want to breach that trust. And I'm like, well, then I'm not really interested in your parental control software. We got to take a break. Bell's telling me you got to take a break. Ray's telling me we got to take a break. So we'll take a break. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
"33 minutes after the hour of 2 o'clock right now, 54 degrees on Music Row, starting in the nation's capital. House Speaker Mike Johnson today demanded President Biden take executive action to stop the latest migrant surge at the border after the Senate left on recess without passing a bill. Andy Field with the latest.
Speaker Johnson writing that the U.S. Border Patrol encountered nearly 2.5 million undocumented migrants this year, more than another 500,000 escaping detention. The House Speaker saying that his party passed tough new immigration restrictions in the House, but that the Senate left without taking action. He is demanding President Biden end what he calls catch and release to turn back all undocumented migrants, reinstate Donald Trump's stay in Mexico before granting asylum plan, and resume building the border wall.
And just Tuesday of this week, the United States saw a record 14,000 apprehensions at the U.S.-Mexico border. It's the highest single-day total in United States history. Kidnapping in Tennessee. News 2 reports that on December 18th, Christopher Ronaldo Cox was accused of attacking a woman that he used to date. It was on Monday of this week that Cox entered the victim's home with a key that she previously gave him and began to choke her. Cox was demanding money while choking her and eventually pushed her to the ground as she tried to get away, and he began yelling and waving a gun in the air. 36-year-old Cox, now in jail, currently being held on a $100,000 bond. And toy stores typically have a girls section and a boys section, but starting next year, California will require another section, one that is controversial. Here's Alex Stone.
One of the new laws going into effect in the new year, large retail stores that sell toys in California will be mandated to have a gender-neutral toy section. Toys that could appeal to both boys and girls, but not marketed toward one or the other. Helen Dean owns Toy Safari in Alameda.
Yay! It's not called woke. It's called American freedom.
But California Family Council CEO Jonathan Keller says enough is enough.
It's a little crazy.
If a store violates the law, they could be fined starting at $250 and going up from there for repeat offenses. That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
I should probably turn on the microphone before launching in. We're about out of time, folks. It's been a fun show today. You guys have been awesome. It's been great, engaging. And I'll try. We've had different issues to talk about, and those are really important. And, you know, the juvenile justice stuff we went through and kind of having all the discussions around constitutional rights, civil liberties, what's going on. I want to make sure that we have enough time. We'll probably do it mostly tomorrow to talk about some of the other issues that I mentioned we would get to today of specific interest. What's going on with Hamas? It is truly shocking to me that the political left refuses, and I mean refuses, to believe Hamas. And I'll save it till tomorrow so we can kind of go through it in a little bit more detail. But one of the pieces that I've been working on is pulling together the comments of the leaders of Hamas and what they say they want. Because even though Hamas is a terrorist organization and unimaginably wicked, I want to be real clear about that. What they did on October 7th is unforgivable. It's not okay. I still want to understand how human beings could do that kind of stuff and laugh about it. Like, I get it. Like, we watch enough movies and we see the villains and we see they're bad guys and they cackle and laugh. But that's fiction. This is real life. And we have video evidence of folks calling mom and dad and saying, hey, I just killed the Jews. Like, are you not proud of me? Yeah. Like, it is truly disturbing stuff. And so my question is, what drives otherwise normal-ish people to do such heinous things? And I really think Hamas has been abundantly clear about this. In my research so far, now they're translated quotes, but they seem to be from credible sources of these translations. They've been unmistakably clear about what they want. Their actions have proved that out. And what's happened is this peculiar thing with the American left, the progressives seem to do, is everything is viewed through the oppressor-oppressed dynamic. I mean everything. That they pick a side and they say this one is the oppressed, and therefore whatever they do is more or less justified. Even if it's bad, we'll say that's bad, but you're not getting the big picture. If they weren't oppressed, then they wouldn't be bad. And then there's the oppressor, which somehow in this situation, even though the oppressor was the one brutally attacked out of the gates, the oppressor is always wrong. The oppressor is in what they call a power position, and therefore should be scrutinized heavily. Meanwhile, the oppressed gets a charitable view towards what they do. And I think that's, one, mind-numbingly stupid, but it's patronizing. It's such elitist drivel. Speaking of, when we started the show, we were talking about common ground. Well, here's some common ground that I think all of us who are listening to this should try to find, is that when any group tells us what they want, we should not then say, but they don't really. What they really mean to say is, I'm hurt and people have oppressed me, and I wouldn't do all the bad, mean things I'm doing if I wasn't hurt and oppressed. And so it's really the oppressor's fault that I have made some of the most atrocious crimes in human history. It's because I'm oppressed. And that dynamic is what the left uses to interpret what's happening with Israel and Hamas. It is messed up. And we need to talk about it because I don't think Hamas has the same problem as the American left. I don't think Hamas is confused about what they want or how they want to get it. They are using those type of voices to create pressure to agitate for what they want and hoping those folks will come to defend them and excuse their behavior. And that is a very difficult question to have. It is certainly politically difficult to have that conversation, but it's something that we need to talk about. And again, when we have a little more time than the 15 minutes left in this show, tomorrow, we will definitely get into that. I talked too about immigration. We say this a lot, right? Like immigration. I actually worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I was tasked with dealing with immigration, and y'all are going to believe this, but one of the things that I was charged, I worked for Jeff Sessions, and I was charged with scuttling some of the McCain immigration reforms, the Romney-McCain stuff of, hey, we just want to do this big, comprehensive thing. And in retrospect, some of it was probably worth having the discussion about. But the idea of saying, hey, there's a lot of people who have violated the law, let's try to make this all, go away, was not something then Senator Sessions, subsequently Attorney General, was particularly interested in doing. And so I've got an intimate knowledge of the immigration system, how it works, what's going on there. And a lot of the stuff that folks are putting in front of you guys and that you hear on the news just isn't true. We talk about one of the phrases y'all hear a lot is the kids in cages. Well, these are families looking for a better life. Some of that's true. You want to know the largest demographic year over year that comprises those encounters that we're seeing on the southwest border? Single adults. So I know what pulls on your heartstrings, which is kids and families, family reunification. You don't want unaccompanied or single minors wandering out in the desert. Like, that's the compelling argument. The reality is, I'm looking at it right now. Customs and Border Patrol data from 2021, 2022, 2023. I'll give you just a comparison as a teaser for what we can talk about tomorrow. Fiscal year 2022. We'll do 2023. We'll make it easy. Single adults, encounters at the southwest border, 1.5 million single adults. Family units, individuals that are a member of family, 821,000. Unaccompanied single minors, 137,000. Accompanied minors, 2,535. 0.10% of the fiscal year 2023 total. Overwhelming number. Single adults. It's not close. Multiples higher than anything else. And that story's kind of consistent. Fiscal year 22, 1.6 or 1.7 million single adults versus 561,000 as members of a family unit. 152,000 unaccompanied or single minors. So even these things that we're sort of, all of this is put on the table in front of us and saying, well, the real problem here is kids in cages. The real problem here is, family reunification. We need to do it. Well, but then why are all the people we're encountering, almost all, the vast majority are single adults? That doesn't make any sense. That's weird. How are we having the answer is, and I should be cautious there. I don't like it when folks do that's weird, curiouser and curiouser, all that sort of like, say what you mean, you're an adult. It's crap. what's happening out there is we're seeing information. It's being the heartstring stuff is being skewed when the rest of the information is being just sort of buried. We're not going to bury it. We're going to talk about it tomorrow in a lot more detail. But if there's something else that you guys want to talk about, then you let me know. You let me know. Because I want to pay attention to that. We can talk about family. We can talk about parenting. We can talk about all the weirdness that entails. We'll wrap it up when we come back on the other side of this break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. We're wrapping up. Interesting. On the Super Talk text line, what about putting a tax on campaign contributions, donations? I have to think through whether that's even constitutional. That seems kind of like a poll tax type thing. So I understand that that's different, contributing to a campaign versus voting. I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I'll think on that one. I really haven't, Dave mentioned that. I haven't really formulated my thoughts on it, but it'd be really, really interested. Alan so one of the things that we're going to talk about when we talk about Hamas is, he said, where's the hue and cry for leaders of Islam to call for an end to the jihad? That's specifically what we're going to talk about, because I think if you listen to Hamas and their reading of the Quran, this is where, again, our society wants to make things different than they are to fit certain cultural narratives. Hamas was quoting the Quran repeatedly after October 7th. We shouldn't make any bones about that. They were absolutely trying to claim the mantle of their faith as justification for their brutalism. And that doesn't mean that your Muslim friends and neighbors are the same as Hamas, but let's not act as if there's no connection to any faith in the same way that various groups have tried to claim the mantle of Scripture to defend barbarism and horrific things. So it's something that we should absolutely think about. We will, Alan, discuss that tomorrow in a little bit more detail. I think we're probably going to discuss the school choice stuff in a little bit more detail, because school choice is now, again, I hate to say conservative groups. There's some right-leaning, maybe, nonprofit public policy groups in the state that are going after school choice. Sorry, guys. I got a little frog in my throat. And I think we need to talk about that. Put it on the table and say, okay, is the folks that we would consider far right connecting with the far left to submarine school choice in Tennessee? Is that a thing that we're cool with? How do we feel about that? Going to try to get some folks on to help talk through that. I think that'll be useful and helpful. Aaron suggested talking about asymmetric warfare. That may be on my pay grade. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that we can get into that tomorrow in too much detail. I do want to talk briefly about my Christmas card experience with my family yesterday. We were at Harlansdale Farm. I get change. We go over there. The best thing of all of this, the best thing, was Jason said, Cameron, if you're going to be in radio, you got to give up the Camels. I worked at it's not a Texaco station anymore, a Texaco station in Brentwood as a teenager, and there was a guy that came in every day and got 2 packs of Camel non-filters. Brian, I know you've got a cool show coming up. Did you stay away from the Camel non-filters?
I am happy to say that I have never, ever, not once has tobacco crossed these lips. My mom and dad, when I was younger, they both smoked, and I just hated it. And so I'm probably the only guy who ever got through the 60s and the 70s without ever smoking anything.
That's impressive. That is truly impressive. What do you got on the show today?
Well, I got a lot of stuff here. Biden is bragging about how many people he helped to eliminate their student loan debt, even though the Supreme Court said he couldn't do that. And it just occurred to me when I hear him bragging about that, he said the quiet part out loud. He said, yeah, I knew that we were probably not supposed to be doing this, but we got 100 and some odd million people. We took care of their student loan debt before the Supreme Court shut us down. And it's occurred to me, that's the way they operate on a lot of things. We're going to do what we want to do until even if we think it's perhaps not legal, until we're told by someone in authority in the courts that we can't do it anymore. And that's true on so many different things. It's true on the border. It's true on student loan. It's true about drilling. And releasing the leases that they're supposed to release, all kinds of things that they just drag their feet. It is exactly their policy, which means they have no respect for the law. We'll be talking about that and a whole lot of other stuff.
Well, thank you, Brian. And it's true. It's absolutely true. It's, hey, let's see what we can get away with. That's the mindset. It's the mindset on so many policies. And it's folks like the people here at this station that make sure that they can't, that call out power and say, no, that's not how we're going to do it. Thank you for listening today. I really appreciate it. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.